I'm going to spend a little bit of time, obviously, next half hour on smoke. And we're going to go over to this screen here, and I'm going to give a couple slides really quick just to explain what smoke is. As a marketing term, we call smoke the all-in-one editorial tool. And what that means is, besides a big marketing term, is that smoke has a tool set that goes way deeper than most editors you probably have seen out there. Do we have any actual editors in the crowd? Okay, good. We got a couple. I think he was just scratching his face, but I think he's going to be an editor tomorrow because he's buying smoke. But anyways, we'll go to the idea of what that means is your typical workflow, and it's not wrong, I'm not criticizing, this is what it's like. You're going to be in your Final Cut, your Avid, your Premiere Pro, but then you need to do some major color correction, or you need to do some motion graphic work, or you need some 3D text. You step out of your editor, you go into another application, you generate it, you render it out, and you put it back into your editor, and you hope that everything lines up, right? Well, a lot of times that works, it does, but it's not as the most efficient workflow that you probably want to be working on because it does sometimes kill your deadline. You can't be as creative as you want it to be. So this is what we're saying. Here's all these different workflows you go through, but the idea is that smoke has all those tools in one environment. Plus, we can take the elements from 3D like Louis showed you, but I'm not going to get into that part. We'll let Louis show that part. Okay. So here's Smoke's interface, and for the few editors that we have here, I just want to show you that we have a very similar layout. This is my bins over here. We call them source areas. We call the record area timeline, or a timeline in other applications. And I've got it set up now that I select my source area. I got my preview of all the different clips that I brought in that I might be using. Down here below, this is my timeline area. I want to start taking clips. I just drag them down and say, let's take this guy. Let's edit that one there. Let's edit this one here. Now, this layout is called storyboard. I can switch it to be your typical record timeline where you'll see your tracks as you would in most editorial tools. This is a little preview window I have of my timeline while still looking at all the possible footage. Now, if I tap over on the side, I switch to what we call the standard view, where I have just a one view. But like Louis was showing you a minute ago, you're probably more familiar with the source record view, where on the right-hand side, I've got my timeline down here. On the left-hand side, I access all of my different clips that are in here. So like this soccer player here, I've got this clip in my bin. I want to incorporate it in my timeline. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to the edit point. And you can see we have all of our inserts, our overrides, the replace, all the different tools that you are familiar with. So I just went and threw that in there. So I've added that clip in there. We look over here and we see he's kicking a soccer ball, but there is no soccer ball, right? Well, the footage is separate for a reason. We want to be able to access the soccer ball and do different things to it or whatever. So just like any other editor, you have a layer-based stacking order. I'll add another layer here and take this clip out of my bin area and just say align edit. So now it's been added in my timeline. I have all different tools that I can apply right to my footage in the timeline. So I select my soccer ball, and I'll come over here and just add a tool, and this allows me to go and associate an alpha channel with that. So now you can see I scrub through. Now we've got the soccer ball. Okay, that's looking great. The one thing, though, is I don't like the fact the soccer ball is going past the edit point where the soccer player isn't there anymore. So what we'll do is go to the edit point. I use a hotkey. I just create a cut. In Smoke, if you want to throw something away, you pick it up, drop it on the bottom, and throw it away. Now I can continue to do all my basic editorial tools if I wanted to. This opening part, we normally don't show basic editorial, but people always ask me at the end of my demo when they see all the tools I'm about to show you, can you do editing? So I really wanted to focus the very beginning to say, yes, you can do your creative editorial work right in Smoke, but we know for a fact you're using other editorial tools right now. Well, the beauty of Smoke is that I can go and I can take what you've done in another application and I can then purpose it and use it in Smoke. For example, I'm not going to demo Final Cut, but here I have Final Cut up here. This is from one of our clients in the UK named Delicious Edit, and they use Final Cut, and they use 3ds Max, and they use After Effects, but they added Smoke to their environment, their workflow, so they can offer more to their client. But they still want to use Final Cut to do the creative editorial. So here you can see we've got some keying that needs to be done. They've done their transition. They've done their dissolves. They've done some basic effects. I now want to take this and bring this into Smoke. It's actually quite easy. If you're using Final Cut, you create an XML file. If you're using Avid Media Composer, it's an AAF file. If you're using Premiere Pro, you can export either one of them. Adobe's got you going XML or AAF, whatever one you want. If I go export, I go XML, I can now go out to my drive, I can generate an XML file, and I'm going to step back into Smoke very quickly and show you that here's my bin area, remember? I'll go into what's called our library. Let me throw that away first of all. I click this. So I stepped into my library. This is my organizational area in Smoke. But what's great is, yes, I can put on my footage and organize it. I can switch to a dual view, and now I can access every single hard drive or every single system hooked up to my Mac right here. And we also got this option. I tap over here. I can scrub clips. I can preview clips. So if you are doing all your editorial work in Smoke, you can set it up. But that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is take the XML file, which is right down here, and I want to bring that into Smoke, okay? Now, this is how difficult it is. Don't blink, okay? I pick it up. I drag it into Smoke. I say drop it in there. It now relinks all the media for me. It builds the timeline. It builds the transitions. It does all the editorial work that was done in Final Cut, and I now can take this and say, let's go and bring this into Smoke's creative environment. I click load to the desktop, and now I come down here and hit a hotkey. There's the same exact Here's the same exact timeline that I had over inside of Final Cut. All the transitions come in, all the dissolves. Now, if there is something like a Primac keyer or a plugin that you use that Smoke doesn't understand, all it's going to do is flag it and warn you. I don't know what that is. You need to go and redo it here in Smoke. But let me switch this back to a standard view. And also what I'll do is I'll jump to another timeline where I have some markers in here. It's the same thing. This is a perfect example. I'm going to zoom in here. So we've got this really nice clip. I'm just going to play this back. It's stock footage that they used, and the client wants us to alter and change it a little bit. They want to do some major color correction work. They want to emphasize the woman and desaturate all the elements around here. Now, you could do that in other editing programs, but it's probably going to be a little more difficult than this. What's nice about Smoke is I'll select this, and I'll just add the color correction tool by clicking on it. I get a subset of the tools by default in my player area. So I can go and adjust my contrast. I can make these adjustments, but I want to access more controls. Notice that next to each tool, there's an E. When I click that, I step into the color correction tool. I'm still in my timeline, but now I have access to all these tools. So this color correction tool here actually won an Academy Award for technology several years ago, and it's a very powerful color correction tool, but I need to do selective color correction. I need to isolate her skin. I need to isolate the trees in the background. So I'm going to switch over to another tool called a color warper. Now, at the top level, the color warper allows me to do, obviously, manipulation to all of the values inside the footage, such as decreasing my black. But here's the power of this. Let's say we want to desaturate this green behind her. I'll tell Smoke, don't work on the master. I want you to work on a selective. Now I come here and I just region select that. The power of this color correction, there's a keyer built right in it. So now that I've isolated that green, I'll go back and say, let's view the result, and I'll do it drastic for demonstration. But I now can color correct just that area because there's a keyer built into the tool. So instead of having to use mask and isolation tools, I have it right inside my color correction. So let's drag that down. We desaturate that. Maybe we want to add a little more color to her. So let's go and add another selective here. So I choose a selective number 2. I'll pick my custom, and we'll click and drag on her face to sample the skin. Once again, I go back to the result. I'm going to increase this, and I can now go and fine-tune her skin tone. But the bamboo poles are so similar to her skin tone, it's affecting that too. Now, this is the keyer that's right here. I could go in here and try to finesse this and fine-tune it, but since we have layer-based editing inside our timeline, let's go back into here. I still have my color correction applied here. Let's make a copy of this. So I'll hold my hotkey down, and I'll drag this up. So I've got 2 layers now with the color correction, but we'll take that top one. We're going to throw the color correction away. The idea is the bottom one, as I toggle down, we have our color correction. The top one does not. So let's just create masked so that the top layer only shows us the bamboo poles. So we'll go back to the first frame. And again, I'm going to add another tool. I'll step into it. Now, the default here is it's going to use a mask that's going to wipe from one layer to the other. And if you just want to do a basic wipe, fantastic. But that's not what I want. You can go in here now and just say, get rid of what was the default, and now I'll create my own. So over in the first frame, you'll see it says add geometry. I add the keyer, another mask here, and I just go along and I create my mask around the first bamboo. I also like the fact that I can break all my tangent handles at once if I select them properly and click on them, so I can just make them straight. Let's add another mask right here. So I'll go like this, real quick, so like that, and then we can fine-tune it, obviously. Now, the mask can obviously be animated as an object or as individual control points. Auto key is on just like you would do anywhere else. The problem we have is, while each mask has its own transform controls, that's fine. We have a camera move that we need to have it follow along, right? So instead of me doing each one of the masks independently, what I'll do is I'll step into our schematic view. Now, the schematic view is just a node representation of everything you're working on. So here I have my 2 masks, and each one of them has an axis. This is the axis from the original mask that I deleted. I'm going to throw that away. What I want to do is tell Smoke, give me another axis, and then with this one, I want you to hook it up to both of those, so that is now going to be my master, and I then have one independent control for both the masks. So now with that master selected, you'll notice that I can manipulate both the masks at one time. Well, I don't want to animate this by hand. That would be silly because inside of Smoke, every module I have a very powerful tracker. So I'm going to step into the tracker, and I'll zoom in so you can see this. I always like to point out, I see no variance in those pixels right there, but watch this. I'm just going to click Analyze Forward and let Smoke do its magic. So it's going to go through frame by frame. Whatever it found in that box on that first frame, it's going to create the animation keyframes for me. And also, I want to repurpose this later, so I'm going to choose Save, and I'm going to come here and override this one I made earlier called Wednesday. So when we return back out here, now as I scrub through, you can see my mask has been animated on the X position for me. So maybe at the very end, I might want to come in here and alter and change this. I could have did a 2-point track mask, doing rotation and so on. Also, looking at the mat really quick, you can see I can come in and I can do in and out softness for this. And if you really needed more control, you can go into what's called the edge gradients, where I now have independent control of my mask for inside and out. And each part of that can be tracked and animated and so on. But that's a little more than I really need here, so I'm just going to add a little bit of offset for this guy too. We'll go back out here. Now in my timeline, you can see if I turn off the bottom layer, we've got the bamboo poles isolated on the top without affecting by the color correction. Now I'm thinking my client's happy, right? Then they go, wait a minute. I really don't like those bolts I see on those bamboo poles. They're very distracting. Can you paint those out? Now, if I'm in another editor, what am I going to have to do? I have to render this file out, take it into another program, maybe a motion graphic program or whatever. But here in Smoke, I tap to the side. I go back to my desktop. Over here, I have all these other tools that are available to me, whatever I'm working on. If I'm doing different effects and so on, I'm going to take this clip, and I'm going to match it out to my desktop with a hotkey. So what I just did was brought the original footage back to the desktop with no color correction and no masking, okay? The point of that is, here I have a full paint program right inside of Smoke. So if I'm doing motion graphic work, I can create paint strokes. I can go and do things like, say, let's go and smear my image. I can create all these different effects, but in this case, I don't want to do motion graphics. I need to roto out these bolts. So to do that, we're going to use a tool called Auto Paint. Auto Paint by default allows you to create a paint stroke over frames. So if you're doing a signature or your company's logo, that's all great. But what I want to do is come in here and say, I want you to take these pixels. Let me make my brush a little smaller. Take those pixels there, and I want you to paint them right here. Well, hold on. Let me reset all that. I need to set this not to be wipe, to be user. Now I'm going to come here and do the same thing. So I'm going to click once again, take these pixels, and paint them right here. Let's get rid of this bolt. Let's get rid of this over here. Clean that up, and let's get crazy. Let's get rid of all of that. So when I click down, Smoke is going to create the paint strokes for me. Let me turn on an option called wireframe, and you'll see what's happening. They're turning red to blue, and that's what I was saying, how it's going to paint the stroke on over frames. Well, I don't want it to do that, and this bottom timeline allows me to control when the paint stroke starts and where it ends. I'm going to tell Smoke to just use what I did on that very first frame, and now, obviously, it needs to follow along. Well, look what I got. There's that same tracker. I enter into the tracker. Instead of processing the tracker again, let's take that tracker saver we saved earlier and return back out here. And now I click Process. Smoke is going to go frame by frame. It's taken 22 seconds to do an 1080p HD, paint every brush stroke on each frame, repositioning the pixels that I sampled, put it in there for me. Imagine if you had to do this by hand, the time-consuming process of what you'd have to go through to get the end result, and it probably wouldn't even look as good as what I'm going to show you now that Smoke finished. Wow, I timed that perfectly. Let's go back out to the desktop now, and when I go into the full player and I play this back, you can see all those bolts are removed that easily and that fast inside of Smoke. All right, so the next thing I want to do is take that and bring it back into my timeline. So if we go to our source record view, I'll go back to the first frame. I'll take this guy back to the first frame too so we can see it. So here we see the bolts are gone. There you see the bolts are still there. Now if I just replace this, that would be a bad thing for the fact that it would then go and override the effects I had. I don't want that. So what I could do is say replace just the source media. So now it replaces it, but it maintains the special effects that I've already put in my timeline. So this is giving you a little bit of idea of what you can do inside of Smoke's timeline. And now I want to go and take a look at another tool that we have, which is called Action. And Louis introduced you to that a minute ago, where he showed you how he was able to start bringing in elements from 3ds Max. In fact, I'm going to use some of the same footage that Louis used here to show you this. And just to point a note, if you download the 30-day trial, you get tons of tutorials, and you get all this footage that I'm showing you on this demo right here. So I want you to go and make sure you do this at home tonight. All right, so let's go step into Action really quick. So again, here's my compositing environment right here, 3D space. We want to start bringing in media. So I say, let's bring in this clouds layer. And I like bringing in this giant file at first, just to really emphasize that in Action, you can bring in any file size. You don't have to have the same footage. It could be all different sizes that you want. Let's go to a 2-view layout, and I'll set this to be a schematic view. So again, in Action, you always have a camera by default. I've got this set up right now, so whenever I bring in a layer, it gets an axis. And you'll notice that my layers will be built up right here. So let's go bring in some more elements. So I'm going to bring in one more footage here. So I bring in my Colosseums. Again, it gets an axis. It's added. Let's bring this back in Z-space. Oh, wait, you know what I want to do? I meant to mention this. Bear with me for a second. This cloud, actually, I want to push that back, and I also want to start bending it, because that's the other thing that's important to understand, that anything you bring into 3ds Max, anything you bring into Smoke actually becomes a 3D geometry. So if I select my cloud layer, let's go and move this guy. I'm going to shrink down by this guy so you don't see him very much. Let's select the cloud layer, and if I come over here and I say I want you to be a bicubic, I can actually come in here and start to bend and manipulate my footage. So as soon as you bring it in, it becomes geometry, which is great for many different purposes. In this case, all I want to do is take this, drag this back, and I'll move it back in Z-space, so we start to create our little environment that we have. Now I'll select my Colosseum, and I'll bring that back to full size, and we'll bring that back down in size here, such as this. Okay, let's go get those two guys now, because I'm running out of time as I look at the clock. So I'm going to go here to my Media tab, and again, I'm going to go out, and this time I'm going to bring this guy in, and we'll bring this guy in, and we'll get back into Action. So just like Louis showed you a minute ago, the keyer is available to you right here. So if I double-click on this, I step into the keyer tool, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the keyer because Louis just showed it, but we're going to look at the matte. I like the fact that if I hold a hotkey and I move around, Smoke is going to give me parameters it thinks that I should adjust to fine-tune. It's trying to help me make a better keyer. I can also go and switch to what's called a patch. I come in here, I start region selecting these things, and of course we just go and crop this a little bit, and we'll set it to 45 frames to match it. Now we got to put a garbage mask. This guy's jumping up and down. I add a garbage mask, and I'm going to draw this mask like so around this guy. And then I can fine-tune it and finesse it. This can all be keyframed over time, of course, if you wanted to, like so. Let's go and switch our opacity and see if I keep him in there. Good job. Okay, return out. Again, we want to take this guy now, and I'm going to move him a little bit to the left here. So let's take this, move him over. Let's repurpose that mask. I select that. I choose Copy. I select the other green screen footage. I choose Paste. There he is. Just to make sure it works, I'm going to step into the keyer. I'll go to the garbage mask and see if I did a good job. Oh, I got to set that to 45 frames also. Bear with me. Oh, I actually did a good job. He stays in there. Maybe down here we got a little issue. But that's the point, is you can repurpose what you've already built and then go and fine-tune it for your needs. Let's take this guy, and we're going to move him over here. So now if I orbit my view, I've created my little 3D world, okay? I've got my guys in there. And the reason why I did this is I want to be able to relight this and add 3D lighting effects. So to demonstrate this, I always like to go to my top view because I really want you to see how interactive this is. I'm working on my Mac here. I'll go to my lighting tools. I'll take my light, I drag it in. You can see now in the player how interactive I am as I move my light in true 3D space. So as I move this around, I can relight the scene in any way I want. I also would like to have shadows being cast from that. So I'm going to double click on my shadow cast tool. I get my pen to double click on my shadow cast tool. Come on. Okay, I'm going to use the mouse. There we go. The pen decided not to work there. So you can see what I have now is I have shadows that are being cast as if in the real world. The one thing I don't like, though, is I don't like the fact that clouds are receiving shadows. It doesn't look very realistic. Well, this is the amount of control you have in Smoke. When I double-click on my image, every image source I can say, I want you to cast shadows. I want you to receive shadows. I don't want you to cast shadows, and so on. So if I tell it not to cast shadows, now I'm not casting shadows on my backplate. And now as I move my light around, just the shadows are falling the way I want. Let's add a little transparency to this, maybe a little softness to this, okay? And we also take our light further away, so we got shadows falling on the wall. Now we're going to add one more light, but this time this light is going to be used a little differently. So yes, the light is added in here, but I want this to actually be a lens flare. Now remember, we are Autodesk. We don't do anything flat 2D. Everything is 3D in Autodesk. So when my lens flare pops in, understand this is a true volumetric 3D lens flare that I have full control for inside the action environment. You also get unbelievable amount of control over the lens flare itself as far as how it is built. There's tons of presets you can use and so on. But also watch this. When I take my light and I drag this back in Z-space, it's going to disappear at a point. Well, why did that happen? The reason is that lens flare respects the alpha information and 3D geometry inside of action. So watch my light. Where are you? Oh, there you are. As it comes through the window, you can see how realistic this is and all the different possible things you can do with this inside the 3D environment. In fact, I always like to orbit to show there's my lens flare in 3D. Okay, the next thing I want to do, I want to take this to one more level. I want to take my light and I want to add a rays effect. We want to have that God rays effect that's coming off of the light. When I add it by default, I now select the light, always helps, Ken. Select my light. You can see now it comes in like almost like a flashlight. But I'll come over here and take my spread. I drag this out. Now you can see I have my God rays effects that are happening. Again, all this is happening in 3D. My client is so happy. They're saying, this is exactly what we want. Then he says to me, I need it in stereo. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Well, it's okay, because Smoke has a full, true 3D environment and cameras, we have a true camera rig for stereo inside of Smoke. So let me show you this. I'll go to my node bin. I'll take my camera. I'll drag it in. And we're going to scrub over here. So here's my original camera, which was just a boring mono camera. I'm going to hide that. This new FBX camera allows me to switch it from being a mono camera. I'll go to top view so you can see this. I'll zoom in here. And you can see there's my mono camera. Now watch how difficult this is. I click a button. I just created stereo rig camera right here. So if I go over to this here, I tell it I want to look at the complete scene. I want to be looking at my right camera. And then I can go and I can turn on my stereo anaglyph. Do we have glasses for people or no? Okay. So you can see now, right here inside of here, I can look at my anaglyph setting while I'm adjusting things. So, for example, if I wanted to come here and select maybe one of these guys, I'll move them over a little bit. I didn't mean to rotate them. Bear with me. I'll take them, and in Z-space, I want to bring them closer to the camera so that it changes the effect. Also, just so you know, inside this extension release of Smoke, we have the ability to go and have left and right output. You can also have top and bottom, and even more importantly, on my Mac, if I wanted to, I can go and have my second video card going out to an actual stereo broadcast monitor to see the actual true end result. So let me bring them over, and notice how the lens flare is respecting the light, but as I look out, don't let them scare you. Don't let them scare you. I don't want to hurt you. Okay? But like a good demo artist, what I have here is, I'm going to step out of here for 1 second. Keep the glasses on. Keep the glasses on. I added some 3D text. So I've got the end result here. I'm going to turn this on the loop, and I'll turn on my anaglyph, because right in the viewport, even in the timeline, and I'll click the play button and let this play. So you can see here, in Smoke, I took a bunch of elements that were not 3D, that weren't left and eye rendered files, and I created a stereo effect because Action has the full 3D camera set up just like a real-world camera. The other thing to keep in mind is if you do receive your left and right footage, you do have actual true camera footage, you can bring it in the timeline, treat it as one, and do all your editorial work and incorporate that with things such as this here inside of Smoke. So, wrapping this up, we're going to go out back to my keynote just for a second. What did we talk about in the very beginning? We talked about what Smoke was. It was an all-in-one editorial finishing tool. We talked about how the typical workflow, you use multiple different programs and render out back and forth, hoping it all works together. Smoke has all of it in one environment. In fact, most of the tools in Smoke are even better than some of those other tools. But the idea is you can create all of this in one, but you also still can work with your Final Cut, your Adobe, your Media Composer. And as Louis showed you earlier, we can take the FBX files coming from 3ds Max, Maya, Softimage, bring that in. My call to action to you is today you're going to go to your hotel, you're going to go to autodesk.com/smoke for Mac, you're downloading the 30-day trial with the tutorials, with the footage, and I want you to be able to do this demo tomorrow, because I'm tired of it, okay? Also, are there any students in the room? Students, educators, you can get a 3-year license for free of Smoke, of Maya, of Softimage, of 3ds Max. Go to the Autodesk website, look at the education. Educators and students can download a 36-month free trial. So I expect to be demoing for the next 3 years. Okay. That is Smoke on the Mac for today. That wraps up our show. I think we're going to show the show reel one more time, and I hope you all come back tomorrow to see more going on here. Thank you for your time.